I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Bern, last week we were on a fascinating topic. We were talking about how to be more powerful in your life, and you brought up a word, or actually a phrase, which has stuck with me the whole week. You were talking about having peak experiences in your life. Mm-hmm. Can you just quickly define for our viewing audience, what is a peak experience?
Well, in an essay that we do called Puzzling, it gradually evolves to a point where I said, now what we're going to talk about for a moment is a peak to peak principle to progress. And what this is about is that as we consider moving along life's time lifeline, okay, and what this represents is the time and the energy that you and I and all of our viewers are going to expend between this moment now and the questionable time in the future when you cease to exist.
Yes.
Now this is a question mark because we have no idea when that's going to be. It could be this evening for some of us, and it could be 100 years for others. We just don't know. We do know that through research, those people who seem to have reached financial independence and real freedom do not see goals as a struggle or a need to separate ourselves or this kind of thing, but rather a process of personal growth. In other words, a person's here today with an innate awareness that if they can get down here in time, having grown from the process, that the world will be attracted to that person. And as we don't have to pursue riches, they will find us if we're prepared to receive them because of our personal development.
What an interesting concept.
Oh, it's just, I know there's a young man in town who is one of the top real estate agents in the United States, living right here in Sacramento in spite of the market. I mean, just an awesome young fellow. And the other day I was in his home, it was about a year or so ago, but time goes quickly. And I was saying, and I'll use his first name, Ed, and I said, what do you attribute this to? And he said, ignoring the process of the business in favor of understanding what I'm about. In other words, it was a constant quest, I believe at the time it was 12 or 13 years of examination of his own personality. Because when he was uncomfortable about something, he wanted to know why he was uncomfortable.
Really?
When he wasn't able to communicate with a certain type of people, he was wondering what he had to do in order to communicate with that certain type of person. In other words, it was about personal growth.
It wasn't about becoming successful in real estate.
No.
It was about overcoming any areas of your personality or
Being
that are
successful in real
weaknesses.
estate was a happy consequence of his personal growth. And
What an
that's
interesting
terribly
concept.
important. Now, for this to occur, we know this, that it has to be based on love. In other words, it has to be involving commitment. Okay? And there has to be a willingness to prepare and to make a contribution in order to capture that stature. In other words, there has to be a period of time when there is a preparation, an acquisition, if you would, of skill, knowledge, and power, whether it comes in the form of money or authority or celebrity. In fact, I think we touched on that when I did strategizing some weeks ago. And then there has to be that time where you make a contribution, and out of that comes the growth. However, it's not going to happen that way. It's not going to. Now, I'd certainly call that a peak experience. But it doesn't happen that way because this person with this stature, this development, these abilities, looks out at this and sees nothing but blue sky. You ever heard the expression?
Nothing but blue sky.
Blue sky, yeah. In other words, this person is illusionary. This is an illusion. I've seen so many young people say, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire. I say, wonderful. How are you going to do it? Well, I don't know exactly, but I know I will because I believe I will. Well, no. That's being illusionary. What's going to have to occur, I want to take the same time lifeline here. And here's the person with this stature wants to be here.
Right.
Okay? You have to envision, you have to have a clear sight on what that's about.
What you're going to become.
Yeah, how you're going to dress, how people are going to receive you, how you're going to act. You know what I mean? What's that really like? What's that vision? Okay, and that has to be real clear. It's called crystallizing. Then there has to be the willingness to prepare and make a contribution. Now, there's that much growth here. Follow what I'm saying? And then you make a preparation and contribution, preparation, contribution, preparation, contribution, preparation. And there you are. And yet you're always in line with what it is you intend. Terribly important. Now, it's probably not going to work that way either. It's going to be more like this. Same time lifeline, starting with the same stature, you want similar growth. Okay? Knowing somehow that you're going to be elevated. Remember the law of stratification?
Yes.
That whenever different size elements are placed in an environment and there's volatility, the larger objects will appear at the top or on the outside. Okay, this is what's occurring. To do that, the vision has to be clear, okay, and then there's going to be preparation, contribution, preparation, contribution, preparation, contribution. However, we must always know that there's going to be moments along this pathway where it's going to be some of these. Preparation, contribution, preparation, contribution, preparation, contribution, and then maybe preparation, contribution, preparation. Now, these points here are called maturation points. It's where we find the balance in our life. For example, this may be an intensity when it comes to making a profit or doing your business. But if you go along there too long, you may have neglected family, your spiritual development. You know, there's some balance here. And so some time has to be spent maturing, getting balance in your life, and then preparing yourself to make the major contributions at this point. This makes it so much simpler, particularly when you realize that these peak experiences, in fact, I'm going to go over here for a second. These peak experiences are acronyms, P-E-A-K. A peak experience occurs whenever we predetermine what we're about to do in short, compartmentalized points of effort, where you predetermine what you're about to do, bearing always in mind what your long-term purpose is.
If I may interrupt you here for a moment, Bern, you said something a few minutes ago about crystallizing the image of who you are, what you want to become.
Right.
Is that part of what we're talking about here, or is that something that you would do even before you predetermine what your activities
I think
are going to be?
you have to do some daydreaming. You know, the daydreamers are the ones who make it. The daydreamers are the ones who can look out in the future and say, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to accomplish, this is what I want to be able to contribute to the world. And they get a vision, and typically they write about it. It's really hard to crystallize effectively without writing, without clipping and pasting pictures, without going and experiencing things. For example, how do you really know you want a certain kind of a car if you've never driven the car? I have a young acquaintance, a very successful young man, who reached a point when he had the money to buy his Maserati. I mean, cash. And he went and he drove it. And he didn't like it. He said it was like a motorized skateboard. He just didn't like it.
But he had the money.
Oh, yeah. And yet he had spent all that time and energy crystallizing on this Maserati based on image and, you know, this type of thing. But when he drove it, he didn't like it, so he drove it back to the car dealership, feeling kind of awkward about everything, and ended up buying a Rolls Royce, convertible Corniche, which was kind of nice. But he did that for an investment. It wasn't as satisfying to him as he thought it was going to be. And he said, I'll never do that again. In other words, if I want something, I'm going to make sure that's what I really want, because I know I can get it. I know I have the capacity. And so I'm going to be careful what it is that I want. And so you have to get a good crystallized picture in the future. Some people call it goal setting, but I don't like the term, you know.
Can we slow down here for just a minute? And I certainly don't want to take away from the peak that we're talking about here, but it seems like we're covering some really important points here.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Because first of all, in my experience, people, number one, don't know what is possible for them to become. Number two, even if they do, they don't believe that they can become it. And number three, it's because they don't know what's possible and they don't believe it, they do not take the time to spell out in very clear detail what it is that they want to become. And they end up going through their lives blown about by the winds of fate, the influence of other people, circumstance, And that's what shapes who they are and their future instead of conscious decision. And it seems to me like perhaps the most important thing that our viewers could do tonight after the show is to sit down and start to make a list of who they want to be, their character, and what they want to accomplish. And maybe even suggest that anything is possible.
So long as it's within the law of physics.
Right.
Right, right.
But not say, well, I could never do this or I could never do that because I'm not smart enough or I'm not talented enough. But even just take for a moment, if I had a magic wand and I could be anybody, who would I be or what would I do?
I think one thing, too, that one of the first steps a person has to take is to celebrate their ignorance. See, if you don't celebrate your ignorance, you might end up feeling stupid. And they're two different, it's not fair. A person can be ignorant and bask in that, which stimulates them to know that they can go out and have more, learn more, do more.
Like being ignorant is an opportunity.
Sure. In other words, ignorance is just an absence of information. And people are not stupid or they're not dumb. I mean, what a terrible thing to think about oneself, that I can't do something. It's always the yet. Remember last week we talked about I can't do that yet.
Yes.
Now, it's okay to choose not to do it, but gee, don't make the choice out of desperation and saying out of your self-denigration. That's not handy. I'll tell you one thing. Celebrate your capacities. Recognize what you have encased in your cranium. Recognize what the world provides for you if you're prepared to prepare and to make a contribution. Now, it's all about contribution.
Yes.
It's not about taking. I'm not looking for go-getters. I'm looking for go-givers. Go-givers are the ones who get the big job done, inevitably.
A very important distinction.
Yeah, you've got to get into a contributive mode, not a competitive position. It's really funny how in our society we've talked about competition. There has to be an awareness that for the most part, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, competition contributes to mediocrity. In other words, for example, if you and I are competing with something, all I got to do is be this much better than you are, and I'm the champion. You know what I'm saying? Where in truth, if I move to my contributive forces, I might be able to be this good, and therefore inspire you to be this good. But if I'm competing, I can content myself with winning. See, to me, this talk about winning and losing in life is inappropriate languaging. It's about surviving and thriving. So there's nothing wrong with surviving. It's just not enough when you have the capacity to thrive. Because in either case, you're going to strive. In either case, you're going to spend your time and your energy, whatever it is you're up to, and so why not choose for the upper road? Because it doesn't take any more time and energy to thrive, but it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of accepting your gifts, your capacities, and to celebrate them. And part of that is ignorance. I mean, to the recognition that you don't know. See, a lot of people are invested out of a survival mode. They're invested in already knowing. I see that all the time. I have people come to the seminar and say, oh, I've heard all this before. And I know they didn't. I made this stuff up. They couldn't have. In other words,
Right.
Yeah. And so, but once you say it, they nod knowingly as though they already knew. It's very important. You can see it happening in a room. Other people, on the other hand, are wide-eyed. They go, whoa.
They're excited.
Yeah, and they're the ones who are going to grow.
Yes.
That recognize something fresh and new. They're looking for it rather than trying to twist things into sameness and already knowing. A control-oriented person is going to be an unhappy person. You know what I mean? Because they're not. In control, that is. And so all these things lead to that one area. And so, yes, you have to kind of look out there and envision what could be, what should be, frankly, given the capacities. Someone once said that hell would be a God revealing to us all the things we could have had, all the things we could have done, all the places we could have visited, all the people that would have benefited by our existence if we'd have just exercised our capacities. I just like to live with that one throughout eternity. Really? I could have
done that
Yes.
and then have missed the opportunity.
Yes. But it comes in contribution, which is based on love. Competition is a lot of fear in that, a lot of posturing, a lot of positioning that is denigrating oftentimes. And I wish somehow we would kind of get through that and go on to cooperation. Deming made a major contribution in that in Japan. the idea of delegating that authority, and reducing fear in the workplace, and letting people reach their excellence and contribute it. It's pretty exciting. We do need to get back to this, if I can, on the peak experience, where we predetermine what we're about to do, evaluate the effect that's going to have on our task, on our vision, okay, and then act on it. See, if we could reduce the time between an idea and the action, we'd all be richer.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, so predetermine, evaluate the effects that's going to have, because there needs to be no surprises. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know. You know what I mean? Deep down in, we know what we're going to get out of this. But then act on it and come out of the experience knowing it was the right thing to have done. Okay? That's a peak experience. And if that's a peak experience, how many can we have in a lifetime?
We could have
infinite numbers.
Yeah.
Infinite numbers.
We could have hundreds each day.
Yeah, how many? Yeah, how many in a year? How many in a month? How many in a week? How many in a day? There's plenty of time, and it's certainly exciting. There's no question. Now, always aware that in order to make this work, you also have to get comfortable with the practice process, which means permission to be clumsy and inept, to be ignorant. Mm-hmm. and to let that be okay. And the premise is you got to do the things you can't do. You've got to go do things you can't do. Otherwise, you're not practicing. Yeah, because it's always a yet. You got it. And then the promise is what? You're going to do that better always. That's the way the mind works. And the system is incredible. I mean, what a gift. We should celebrate it every day. And then put those two together and you start moving forward. And it can be a pretty exciting adventure. Do you have anything you want to tangent off on?
Well, I had one question. You had drawn, if I can pull this back up here for a moment, you had drawn peak-to-peak experiences. Now, Bern, are there some days when maybe we're down here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what do we do when we're down here? We feel like we're in a hole. We can't see the light of day. From down here, I can't even see the vision of who I want to become.
Let's do another sheet here. This is a fascinating thing. I have a thing called a time consciousness journal that I use. And what it is, we take a day, and it's segmented up into hours and half hours and 15 minutes. And when I predetermine what I'm going to do during a specific time, and I do it, well, I give myself a peak experience in short increments of time. Okay? And then if I don't do what I said I was going to do, I give myself a valley. So it's a peak and valley process. And if I have another 15 minutes where I'm neglectful, or I procrastinate, or I avoid or ignore, then I get another one. Now, at the end of the day, then I can start making isosceles triangles out of those.
Oh,
this would look this way and this way, see? And pretty soon the day begins to take on this kind of a look, okay? And the idea is that the next day you look at that and you want to get above that line. You become more conscious of this. Now, these things come out of neglect, that's all. See, this is preparation on this side, and this is contribution. This is neglect and survival.
I see.
See, these things occur when we neglect to stay conscious, when we neglect to do the things we know, what to do.
The little voices in the back of our
That's
mind.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
A lot of this is governed by conscience and impacted by conscious thought. It's kind of like, this whole idea is like writing your book of life instead of reading it. Most people kind of do what they do, and then they stop occasionally, look back, and say, "How'd I do?"
And see
and
what they did.
Yeah, they're always disappointed. And then they say, "Oh, tomorrow." And then they go about their business, and they stop and they look back, still disappointed. That's reading the book. It's too late. You know what I mean? The idea is to write the book. In other words, it's kind of like keeping a journal. I don't think I've ever met anyone who kept a journal. Okay, it's kind of like a diary, but a journal about their day's activities and their visions and experiences and what have you, who didn't do better than when they weren't keeping the journal. Because if you know you're going to make a journal entry this evening, certainly that would impact what you did during your day. I mean, after a while you become conscious of wanting to make a good journal entry, which influences your behavior. There comes a point when you can write your journal entry in the morning.
Right, in advance.
Exactly. You can actually, people say, make it a nice day. I say, well, thank you, I will. And they look at me funny and they, well, how does he know that? Is what I've decided years ago to have a nice day today, because the idea is to make it a nice day. I mean, we're in command of that, and we do that by the contributions that we make. In other words, the best thing to do is to make it a nice day for someone. And when you encounter someone, if you can conduct yourself in such a way where they're going to tell 2 or 3 people about it a little later, you'd have had a pretty interesting day. I mean, tell the people about it favorably. Yeah, I crossed paths with this guy, this woman this morning, and gee, I mean, she made me feel wonderful, and she was kind and gracious and sensitive. It was really unusual. See, if you can do that numbers of times a day.
But but what if I do that and then I go to work and my boss fires me? And then on my way home,
What has he lost?
then I get a flat tire on my car. And then I get home and my kids yell at me.
Uh-huh.
But I'm not in control of what my boss does or what happens if I get a flat tire on my car or if my kids yell at me. How can I still have a nice day if those things are happening?
Because I think when you take command and you get into a commitment-oriented and completion process, I swear those things don't occur as much, and when they do, you absorb them as consequences. There was a time in my life when if I had a flat tire or whatever, I would go bonkers. And now, guess what? I have a flat tire.
Yeah.
And you go about fixing it and managing it. You make a phone call, and you stay where you are. See, most of our pain and upset comes from trying to be someplace else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, and by the way, the boss that fired you, what did he lose? Oh, my.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was the loser if you are a contributive, committed person having peak experiences. Typically, that's not going to occur. People get fired because they're not doing the job. These people go way beyond that. They do more than what is expected.
Well, let's take a worst case scenario. Let's say that you weren't doing the job. Say you deserve to be fired. And now you don't have any way to feed your family. Could there still be value in that experience?
Oh, I think so.
Maybe
think so.
what kind of value could
Because
there
I'll
be?
tell you-
How could you look at that as a positive experience?
Well, just be aware that that's a choice you have to make, I believe. In other words, when you say this occurs, say, okay, now what's open to me? Because time after time after time, my whole life, I've seen people disconnected from their life, and I mean blossomed into something else. You just know that because you do make a choice. That choice is made. It's kind of like it's all about choices. A person is moving along here. I remember when my children were growing up, when they messed up, I'd say, okay, let's sit down and talk a minute. Let's go back in time. Let's go back in time, and you try to remember where you made the choice that led to this consequence. Go back and where could you have turned left instead of going right?
Yes.
Where, you know what I mean?
Yes.
At that point, and now if you had that to do over again, how would you handle it? Now, just understand that you have a capacity for being predetermined. This is what I'm going to do. The same thing is here. Just know that it's a matter of choice. At this point in time, you've got a choice. If you choose this way, so much the better. If you choose this way, it's a choice. If you keep choosing down, I can't even imagine what could occur. But at every one of these junctures, you have another choice. And if you can keep choosing appropriately, the adjustments. See, that's another thing, too. It's adjustment versus adaptation. Most of our difficulties come from adapting, surrendering, succumbing, accommodating, conforming, making do. When you get into an adjustment mode, where you initiate, where you create, okay, where you're precognitive, you begin to have a real influence not only on your behavior, but everyone else's. I mean, I have some of these principles that we talk about, I have never seen them not work. I have seen them backfire if you're in an inappropriate environment. In other words, if an environment cannot accommodate and applaud a contributed personality, that personality needs to move on anyway.
They probably will be either choose to or be forced
Sure,
to,
exactly.
which would be a good thing to happen
Exactly.
under those circumstances, although it may not seem like a good thing at the time. Later on, they'll find that it was.
One of the things you mentioned too, I know there's a lot of people who are pretty dependent on the way things are. They're dependent upon their relationship, they're dependent upon their job, they're dependent upon the house, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's always a dangerous place to be. That's always, in other words, the more independent we can become and put ourselves in a position to be where we want to be on purpose, our life gets better and all the lives around us are enhanced. And that's what all of our series is about, is to re-prepare people to be in command of their life instead of trying to control it.
Right.
So in other words, a lot of the pain that people suffer is because they lost control. I mean, you mentioned that here a couple of weeks ago, that we're always striving to get back in control. Well,
Yeah.
you got to give that one up and stay in command of your perspective, as your behavior, your attitude, in command now. Use your authority. And it's a constant thing of making choices.
I really appreciate this analogy of making choices. And again, I do think it comes back to knowing where you want to go. Because if you don't know where you want to go,
It's tough.
any choice will take you there, right? So
Now, if you don't know where you want to go, find someone who's going someplace and jump on the bandwagon, and there you will find your direction. Socrates said that, 2,500 years ago? That if you can't define your own purpose, find someone who has one and follow them. And out of that experience, you'll find yours.
really, that's
Yeah.
an interesting
Yeah, it's about
concept.
fellowship. In other words, a lot of us really are not prepared. It's really hard to sit down and say, what do I want out of life?
Yes.
And I've seen a lot of people had no sense of direction, and because they're unwilling to follow. See, it's about fellowship. And followers earn the right to lead. If you don't follow, you may never get a chance to lead because you haven't earned the right. And so it's a matter of finding someone who has a sense of direction, aligning yourself with them, cuddling up, nurturing whatever that they have to offer, and then go. Some of the most successful young people I had in my life were great mimics. Great mimics, which means, by the way, it's time to say that this is Life Talk. And we talk about life and living and making a living. And people want to call us, they can do this at 1-800-661-3490. And once again, that's 1-800-661-3490. And we'd appreciate it if they'd call, and we'll send them a cassette tape of the show, an audio cassette.
Yes.
And I've had a lot of people call and ask about you. Yes.
Well, we sure have fun on this show, don't we, Vern?
Yes. And my name is Byrne, and the last name is...
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Vern.
We'll see everybody next week.
Great.